The Atlanta Braves designated Tyler Kinley for assignment on Tuesday to bring back AJ Smith-Shawver, who starts today against Minnesota. You can see the vision for the October bullpen, but they've got to get there first. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, a production of the Believe Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsay Crosby, author of the Braves Today newsletter over at bravestoday.com. We're going to talk about last night's loss. It's a similar story to Monday night's loss, right? An early deficit. The offense can't seem to overcome it. Deficit isn't as big this time. Doesn't matter. They can't seem to find a way to come back and they lose. We'll talk about that. But before we do that, the big roster move that I think surprised a lot of people was Tyler Kinley being designated for assignment on Tuesday to add AJ Smith-Shawver back to the roster. This is the second reliever that the Braves have DFA'd in the last 3 days because they DFA'd Danny Young on Sunday to add Ray Kerr. And so it's becoming clear what the Braves are trying to do here. If you'll remember, before the season, we talked about the ideal Jeremy Hefner pitcher, right? What that reliever looked like. A guy who could get both lefties and righties out. A guy who had a bunch of pitches, could cover multiple innings. And you can see how that's starting to take shape. The guys that the Braves have moved on from, and to his credit, Danny Young was throwing multiple pitches, right? Danny Young's not the kind of guy who's just spamming one or two things. He was throwing a sinker and a sweeper, and he had a changeup and a cutter, but he virtually never used them. So it was really just a two-pitch mix. He technically fits the definition of what Jeremy Hefner wants, but in practice, not really. Obviously, the results weren't great. The stuff, like the actual stuff, was fantastic. The stuff plus scores for Danny Young were really good. Problem was he just didn't know where it was going. So 8.03 ERA. The expected ERA is only a 6.89. They DFA'd him. As of time of recording Tuesday night, we don't have a resolution as to that yet. If he passes through waivers, I imagine they'll outright him to Gwinnett and try to keep him in the organization. He does have future control. So as he gets a little bit farther away from his Tommy John, it's possible he figures out the missing piece here with his control. Maybe he has another shot next year to work out of the bullpen. And then behind him was Tyler Kinley on Tuesday. And Kinley's overall numbers aren't awful, but they're not great. Right? This year, 4.01 ERA. And that is a little bit of an underperformance of a 3.42 expected ERA. And by comparison, last year when you acquired him, he pitched to a 3.96 ERA on a 3.51 expected ERA. So he was very much the same vein of player this year that he was last year. The problem is, last year in Atlanta from the deadline on, in those 25 innings, he had a 0.72 ERA. We didn't see this version of Tyler Kinley last year. After the trade deadline, he allowed a grand total of 2 earned runs in 25 innings for the Braves down the stretch. This year, 21 runs, 19 of which were earned, and 42 and 2/3 innings. Struck out 42, so about 1 an inning, but he walked 20. He walked 6 in the 25 innings last year. And it felt like Tyler Kinley was trying to do some different stuff this year, right? He threw that curveball. Felt like he threw it a lot more than he threw it last year. He added some pitches. He threw a sinker this year. First time he's thrown that since 2024. He threw a splitter for the first time, I think, ever on Monday. But ultimately, the locations weren't there. The stuff itself took a step back from what it looked like when they had him last year, and Atlanta decided to move on. It's not a ton of money. It was a $4.25 million contract, and so you're only on the hook. You're on the hook for all of it, but it's not like it's a ton of dead money that's just floating out there. And the one thing I will say about the 26 Atlanta Braves, maybe it's because you haven't necessarily had Jurickson Profar's money on the books, but the one thing I will say is they have been more willing, outside of Ha-Sung Kim, they've been more willing to just move on from guys and eat the money. They moved on from Aaron Bummer. Now Tyler Kinley, right? Bailey Falter, they took him in at the trade deadline and stuck him in the minors. Joel Payamps, they passed him through waivers and stuck him in the minors. He's making $2.25 million, right? They've been a little more willing to deal with some of this dead money and just take it on the books. But what they did to do that was they added AJ Smith-Shawver. And the plan for AJ Smith-Shawver, he is today's starter against Minnesota in the finale, in the day game. Which I love that they did this in the way that everything shook out. So it's temporarily, Walt Weiss told us before the game on Tuesday, that for at least a little bit, and I know he spoke just a couple days ago about not being on board with this, which is the funny part, that they're going to use 6 starters. But Walt did say this was temporary. Quote from friend of the show, Gabe Burns, quote, right now we have 6 starters, and like I said, it's not going to stay that way the rest of the season. We'll have to make an adjustment, but it'll be based on need and performance. My guess is unless AJ Smith-Shawver falls on his face, it'll be Grant Holmes moving to the bullpen. Not the first time that you've had to do that. But what this does by calling up AJ Smith-Shawver is this now adjusts your rotation in a really good way. So Smith-Shawver today, Grant Holmes will now be the guy tomorrow. That pushes Chris Sale to Friday against Milwaukee, where he will match up with Jacob Misiorowski. So Misiorowski versus Sale on Friday. Lucky us. And if you continue to project this out, you'd get Elder versus Logan Henderson on Saturday. You'd get Shane Drowan versus Martin Perez on Sunday. Braves are off on Monday. And then Tuesday, when LA's in town, you get, in a different order, but you get what I consider to be your likely postseason starters, again, barring somebody falling on their face. You get Tyler Mahle versus Eric Lauer in Game 1. You get AJ Smith-Shawver versus Roki Sasaki in Game 2, which is going to be fun. 2 dudes, 2 flame-throwing kids who both have really good split changes. Going to be a fun game. And then Game 3, provided you move Sale back onto back up a day, and it wouldn't be it'd still be additional rest. You move Chris Sale up to Thursday, you get him for Game 3 versus LA against Tyler Glasnow. 1, you still don't have to face Yoshinobu Yamamoto or Tarek Skubal or Blake Snell, actually. You don't have the hardest pitchers on LA's roster to face. I'd rather face Eric Lauer, Roki Sasaki, and Tyler Glasnow than I would. And I think that's probably the first start for Glasnow off the injured list, too. I'd rather face those guys than face Yamamoto and Skubal and Snell. The flip side of this is it doesn't prepare you to face those guys in the postseason. But you have the best possible rotation for LA, and you get to match Milwaukee's ace with your ace. So it works out really well. Now, the only adjustment you have to make here is the finale against LA. You either need to swap Holmes and Sale, or you need to just move Holmes to the bullpen at that point. And it kind of feels like with the off days going forward, you can do that. The only reason you're running a 6-man here is because you don't have an off day on Thursday. You have a makeup game from when you got rained out in Chicago versus the White Sox. So I think it's Anthony Kay versus Grant Holmes on Thursday on a random day game. And then after that, Milwaukee, LA, and you get the best part of your rotation or the highest ceiling guys in your rotation versus the Dodgers. And then what this does for your bullpen, I think is really cool because, and I can't believe I didn't finish this thought when I started it earlier in the show. That just shows you how I kind of get off track at midnight here. But now you can take your bullpen, and the configuration of your bullpen is either back end stuff monster leverage arms, Raisel Iglesias, Dylan Lee, Didier Fuentes, Dylan Dodd, or it's diverse pitch mix multi-inning guys in Brent Suter and Ray Kerr and Victor Medeiros and eventually in Grant Holmes. And I will point out too that both Dodd and Fuentes can give you 2 innings at a time if you need that. You're not asking Dylan Lee to do that. You're not asking Raisel Iglesias to do that, but you can ask these guys to do it. And so you can see a path here where your bullpen is a bunch of multi-inning guys that have multiple pitches and don't have massive platoon splits because they have multiple ways to get guys out. And you've got your stuff monsters, your leverage arms, who you can throw in just about any situation. Unless it's Raisel Iglesias, don't throw him if it's not a safe situation because he doesn't do well in those. And then at some point in time, you're going to be adding back Robert Suarez, who would fit into that leverage group. And at some point in time, you're going to be adding back Ronaldo Lopez, who, if he is in the bullpen and not the rotation, which kind of feels like as of right now, if Holmes is already bumped, your options would be if AJ Smith-Shawver falters, you put Lopez back, and if not, you put you put Lopez in the pen. He can be in that multi-inning group because he's been starting for you, but he also has leverage relief experience. So when you get to the postseason, your 13-man pitching staff, let's look at the NLDS. Let's say you decide you need 3 starters with the off days. And that's doable because assuming you have a chance to set your rotation, game 1 is October 3rd. So that guy can come back and start 4 days later on October 7th for game 4. Game 1, Chris Sale. Game 2, Tyler Mahle. Game 3, AJ Smith-Shawver. That third one's what AJ's auditioning for right now, clearly. And then your bullpen is 10 guys. You take Iglesias, let's assume Suarez is back. Iglesias, Suarez, Lee, Fuentes, Dodd. There's your 5 leverage relievers. And then the other group is 5 guys who can all pitch multiple innings and can get outs. And you're making that group from some combination of Brent Suter, Ray Kerr, Victor Medeiros. You've got James Karinchak you can talk about in Gwinnett, although he's not throwing multiple pitches. So he's outside of that style that you want. You've got Holmes, you've got Lopez, you've got Martin Perez, you've got Bryce Elder. You have 7, 8, 9 options to fill out that pitching staff and to fill out that group. That's the plan here. And I think you're seeing Atlanta get closer and closer to that by saying, Danny Young, we now know he's not going to be part of it. Let's go ahead and move on. Give me that roster spot. Let's audition somebody else. Tyler Kinley, he's not going to be part of that. Let's move on. We'll eat the money. Let's move on. Let's audition that roster spot. But the guys who have come up and have been able to get it done, Victor Medeiros, they brought Ray Kerr back. Ray Kerr is honestly probably auditioning for a spot right now too. If he stumbles and doesn't do well, they're probably going to try to pass him through waivers again and do something else. Maybe that's the Ronaldo Lopez spot. Who knows? But you can see the vision here. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying it doesn't have its flaws and it doesn't have a finer line to walk than if you were able to make a trade for somebody, if you were not shocked by the Jacob deGrom news. That was the report that came out earlier this week, was that the Braves were legitimately shocked that deGrom said no, that the we don't know the package, but that the deal with Texas was done. You don't, at the trade deadline, you don't go to a player and ask them to waive their no trade clause unless the deal is either done or agreed to in principle, right? You know we're going to make this trade. If they say yes, this deal is going to happen. So, Braves didn't add it. We're not relegating the trade deadline. What we are talking about is you can see the vision here. And again, smaller margin for error than you'd like, but the vision's there, right? You can see what they're trying to do. In just a minute, it was hard to see what they were trying to do on Tuesday night because the offense was dreadful. And this game followed a familiar pattern. We'll talk about that next right here on Braves Today. Welcome back to Braves Today. Special early morning edition. Wanted to get this recorded on Tuesday night so we can get it out early. Since there is a day game today, I don't like to drop the show at noon knowing that the game's going to start soon after and there's just no, people won't watch the show. It's just not time to do both. Sorry for not giving you a heads up on this, but it's coming out pretty early in the morning, right? Okay, 4-1 loss to the Twins. It was 2-1 for a good portion of this game. And again, the first inning was the problem. And this wasn't a situation like Martin Perez had where it was just walk some guys, they got cashed in or whatever. This was 2 bad pitches from Tyler Mahle. He gets 2 outs. He leaves a first pitch fastball middle for Ryan Jeffers. Double off the wall that I thought was gone. I just, off the bat, in the flight, watching Michael Harris just keep going back and keep going back, I thought this ball was gone. Off the wall, double. Josh Bell has... Okay, I did a show last week about how ABS hasn't been that hurtful to the Braves being bad at it. You saw a really great example of what a well-timed, a situational example of what a well-timed ABS challenge can do in that Josh Bell at-bat. He fouls off a splitter that outer third, but maybe a little higher than you want in the zone. Fouls it off. Four-seam fastball up and in. Just off of the plate, called a strike. Josh Bell challenges it. They overturn it, so it's now 1-1. It's very easy to see how, if it's an 0-2 count, Tyler Mahle's splitter he throws right here is probably a good 6 inches below the zone, which we've seen guys go down and get those, but it's probably well below the zone, and he's just trying to see if he can get some chase. He's throwing it in it's not a waste pitch. He's throwing it in the chase zone. But it's not in the shadow. It's below the zone. He's trying to see if he can get some chase on it. But because it's a 1-1 count, and he doesn't want to get behind, the splitter is aimed closer into the zone, and he hangs it. Knee high, down the middle, and it just gets blasted by Josh Bell. 110 miles an hour, 2-run home run. Braves are down 2-0. Then mostly non-competitive walk to Cody Clemens. And then after that, Mahle locks in and he's good. He gets a line out by Royce Lewis. Shout out to Michael Harris II. That ball was like, it was coming right at the sun shade break, the Terminator between the sun and the shade. And Harris had to fight the sun, but he gets out of there. From that point on, 4 singles across the next 5 2/3 innings for Tyler Mahle. And he gets pulled at 76 pitches with 2 outs in the 7th after a single to Brooks Lee. Walt Weiss was like, all right, we're going to chase a win here, right? He pulled the bull. He pulled the levers. He decided to chase a win, even though the offense hadn't done anything to show him that it could do, that it had a push for a win in them, other than Drake Baldwin homering in the 6th. I'm willing to bet you If Baldwin doesn't hit that homer and it's still a 2-0 game, not a 2-1 game, they probably don't go after it. But they get the Baldwin homer. It's now 2-1. You knocked their starter out of the game. Minnesota's pen isn't really that good. I get it. They pull Mahle. They go for the win. And the pitch counts for Mahle. 26 pitches in the first inning. But after that, just stupidly efficient. 6 pitches, 7 pitches in the third, 8 pitches in the fourth. A terrible 11-pitch inning in the 5th inning. 9 pitches in the 6th. And then he gets lifted with 2 outs in the 7th at 9 pitches. So again, 76 pitches after firing off 26 of them in the first inning. Great rebound for Tyler Mahle. This was one of those games, we talk about this a lot with Chris Sale, where a guy does not have his best stuff that night, and you'll see one of the other number 4, number 5 starters in Atlanta's rotation get blasted for 4 runs in that 5 and dive outing. Tyler Mahle did not have his best stuff last night. He gets 8 whiffs in 45 swings. The average exit velocity allowed is in the low 90s. But he's incredibly efficient, and he makes it through 6 2/3, allowing no additional runs and leaving the Braves in a position to win the game. There's not much more you can ask for. And in his 3 starts in Atlanta since the trade deadline, other than ripping just 2 sliders, it's been almost entirely 4-seam splitter cutter. And he's throwing more splitters. He was at 20-something% on the year entering this game. He threw 41% splitter to 45% 4-seamer tonight. That's the simplified game plan. Murphy, for the most part, did a decent job of calling pitches, varying the sequences as much as you can when you're throwing 2.5 pitches. He threw 11 cutters. But there you go. It's been, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say he's probably, from a results perspective, been the best starter traded at the deadline. Nobody with his new team is doing better than Tyler Mahle. The scary thing is he went from 0 earned runs to 1 earned run to 2 earned runs. So at this rate, he's going to get blown up in 4 outings from now. He's going to get blown up for 6 runs. That's the bad part here. Break that trend somehow. But the problem here was the offense. They finished with just 6 hits. The only run came on that solo shot from Baldwin in the 6th. And of the 6 hits, all but one of them came from just 2 players. Michael Harris had 3. 2 of those were doubles. Drake Baldwin had a homer and a single, and Ozzie Albies added a single. They left 6 runners on base. They went 0 for 6 with runners in scoring position. Now, this was another one of those really frustrating, they were hitting the crap out of the ball nights where they weren't falling. And some of that was a launch angle thing. Atlanta had 15 hard hit balls. 9 of them were over 100 miles an hour. Only 4 of the 15 fell for hits. And when you look at a lot of these for Atlanta, there was a couple. Matt Olson had a line out that had an expected batting average of 670. But a lot of these were just, they weren't elevating the ball well enough. Ronald Acuna Jr., 107 miles an hour, expected to be a batting average of 410, but it was -7 degrees. It was a ground ball. Michael Harris got a single on a similar batted ball. It was -3 degrees and not -7, but still, ground ball. His went through. And that's just what happens in baseball, right? Harris, again, gets some doubles here. Baldwin has the homer. Baldwin also has a fly out. But like Matt Olson, 102 miles an hour, but -2 degree launch angle. Ozzie Albies, his single, 6 degrees. But the rest of these, Mauricio Dubon, hard hit ball, -13 degrees. Austin Riley, hard hit ball, -2. Michael Harris, ground out, -13. They're just pounding these things into the ground. They had a couple flyouts in there, right? Ronald had one that probably should have been classified a pop out, but it went far enough where they just called it a flyout. But for the most part, the Braves just struggled to elevate the ball. A lot of the non-competitive outs were Ozzie had a 77 mile an hour grounded at -33 degrees. He chopped that bad boy into the ground, right? Matt Olson had a negative 15. Just Ozzie had another one that was like 84, negative 11 degrees. Mauricio Dubon had a 73 mile an hour that was negative 12 degrees. Just a lot of not solid contact and poor launch angles. Doesn't matter how hard you hit the ball if you're pounding the ball into the ground. You're never going to get a home run that way. And it feels like at times all they're trying to do is hit home runs. And the few times that they were able to get guys on base, they weren't bringing them in. In that sixth inning, the sixth inning was the best chance Atlanta had. And in retrospect, when I wrote the game story, I should have written that the sixth inning was the turning point of the game. Drake Baldwin gets the homer, back-to-back singles. They pull Zebby Matthews for reliever Cody Funderburg. Strikeout, ends the inning. The guys are stranded on first and second. And Atlanta doesn't get another base runner until the ninth. Michael Harris leads off the ninth with a double. Ground out, strikeout, fly out. He advances to third, but never comes in. And obviously, you needed a few more behind him to tie the game up. I don't really know what there is to say about the offense other than they have to be better. I don't have any sort of deep analysis here. And I know that's what people come here for, and I apologize. It just, they've got to be better. And it's one thing, it's still not okay, but it's one thing when you do it against the Yankees. And you do it against even the Diamondbacks, who, on the whole, their rotation has struggled this year. But the guys you faced have pitched well and were in pitching well at the time you faced them. But you also struggled offensively against the Mets. And now you're struggling offensively against the Twins. And the problem you have with this is at the same time that you're on this skid, Philly just won 5 straight. And you have to take on both Milwaukee and Los Angeles this week and the next week. I'm not going to be that person who starts screaming the Braves are doomed and they're not going to make the playoffs and all of that. I had somebody today on social media suggested that. And I'm like, listen, if you're so convinced the Braves are going to make the postseason, put some money on it. Show me a betting slip or shut up. Because it's 99.5% odd they make the postseason. But I do think it's very obvious to say if they play offensively in October like they're playing now or like they played in June, they're not going to be in the postseason for long. I'm not saying it's a guarantee. Absolutely not, because nothing in baseball is guaranteed to anybody. And people who come and they say, oh yeah, the Braves are guaranteed to get swept and eliminated in the first round. One, shut up. Give it a rest already. But 2, let's actually wait for that to happen. And again, I'll admit, if they play like this in October, they're not going to be in the postseason very long. But the flip side of this is when we saw them hot early in the year, holy cow, they looked like the best team in baseball. And what is really frustrating about this team, I've mentioned this a couple times on the show, and people who've been watching this show for a long time saw the original interview with John Smoltz where he talked about this. In the postseason, all you need is 3 hot hitters, 3 hot starters, 3 hot relievers. And the most frustrating thing about Atlanta's offense feels like it's the fact that they're either all hot at the same time or nobody's hot. And I want to make the joke that they're so good in the clubhouse and they have such great clubhouse chemistry that they're just, this kind of stuff just feeds off of each other and it's some sort of collective hot streak. And I don't know what you do at this point. And one of the bits of feedback I got yesterday from the show when I talked about wild card versus an LDS is the advantage of playing in the wild card is if your offense is hot entering the postseason, they get to keep playing, right? You don't have to stop and give them 3 or 4 days off and hope they can find that hot streak again when they get back. And the way that we've seen this team struggle, 2023 was like that. You had an off day. You were off for the wild card. You had 4 or 5 days off. And I remember, that's what I did, was doing the Prospect podcast. Hayden Harris came on the show, and he talked about going to Truist Park, and they were bringing in the minor leaguers to pitch to the major league guys to try and doing little sim games, trying to keep them hot, trying to keep them going for the postseason, and it didn't work. And it took a year or two for a lot of teams to figure out, if you had that bye, what to do to get going and still be hot in the postseason. So that's the other side of that conversation. And I regret not spending enough time on that part of this yesterday. At the end of the day, I've said it a couple times now. I think I said it yesterday. I've said it last week and a couple times this year. This team's going to go as far as the offense takes them in October. Your rotation was never going to be the thing that took you to the World Series. It was going to be part of it. It was going to help you. But even if you had Spencer Schwellenbach and Mr. Strider healthy behind Chris Sale, your offense was going to be the thing that made or break this. And so far, in the last 2 weeks, the offense hasn't shown that they're up to the task, just like I said yesterday. And hopefully we're not saying this again on Thursday. Because the hard part right now is there's no help coming through the door. That's the frustrating part about where you are right now. You don't have a lot of top prospects sitting in AAA waiting for a call-up. There's a couple options, right? Patrick Closey made AAA this year. I think he has 120 plate appearances up there. You've got a couple outfielders in like Brewer Hicklin and Deshaun Kiersey. They're not prospects. They're 30 and 29 years old, respectively. What, you're going to call Kyle Farmer to come up and help you? Is Brett Wisely going to give you an offensive boost? Is Sandy Leone the X factor in Gwinnett right now? I love the Gwinnett Stripers. I love the ballpark. I love the people. I love the team. I love watching them. They're not the answer. It's the guys in the major league clubhouse that are going to make or break this offense in October. And they've got 5.5 weeks to figure it out. I do think we saw the playoff lineup on Tuesday night, right? Dubon was the shortstop. Murphy behind the plate. Baldwin at DH. Your outfield was Ronald and Harris, and then it started off with Yastrzemski. When they put a lefty reliever in, Lane Thomas came in. I think that's your playoff lineup. And I think the only real change is they probably change who is in the outfield in left, depending on if there's a lefty or righty on the mound between Yastrzemski and Thomas. Maybe there's a game in there where they give Murphy a day off if he's feeling it. But with the off days you have built into the schedule, I think that's the playoff roster. I think that's what you're going to see every day. And at least last night, they weren't good enough. Let's see if they can be better the next time. That'll do it for an early morning edition of Braves Today for Tuesday, August 18th. Please like the video. Please subscribe. I'll be back a little bit, sometime soon, actually, with the scouting report to break down the pitching matchup for today and Taj Bradley versus AJ Smith-Shawver, what we're looking for, what we're watching for, all that good stuff. So stay tuned for that. Until next time, this has been Braves Today.